How are you, everybody? See this? This was a gift from one of my dear friends and members of our church family here, and I love it. And I want you to know, I think you already do, but I want you all to know that this pastor really does love you. So now I've got to move the stand over so that I can read my post, but I wanted you to see this beautiful shirt. So thank you, Carly. So the story that I'm going to share with you today is actually a sad and difficult story, but it has an inspirational point. So I hope that you like it as much as I did. It moved me greatly when I read through it. It's called The Storm, and it's about sacrifice. After a few of the usual Sunday hymns, the church's pastor slowly stood up, walked over to the pulpit, and before he gave his sermon that evening, he briefly introduced a guest minister who was in the service that evening. In the introduction, the pastor told the congregation that the guest minister was one of his dearest childhood friends, and that he wanted him to have a few moments to greet the church and share whatever he felt would be appropriate for the service. With that, an elderly man stepped up to the pulpit and began to speak. A father and son, and a friend of his son, were sailing off the Pacific coast, he began, when a fast-approaching storm blocked any attempt to get back to shore. The waves were so high that even though the father was an experienced sailor, he could not keep the boat upright, and the three were swept into the ocean as the boat capsized. The old man hesitated for a moment, making eye contact with two teenagers who were, for the first time since the service began, looking somewhat interested in his story. The aged minister continued with his story. Grabbing a rescue line, the father had to make the most excruciating decision of his life. To which boy would he throw the other end of the lifeline? He only had seconds to make the decision. The father knew that his son was a Christian, and he also knew that his son's friend was not. The agony of his decision could not be matched by the torrent of the waves. As the father yelled out, "I love you, son," he threw the lifeline to his son's friend. By the time the father had pulled the friend back to the capsized boat, his son had disappeared beneath the raging swells into the blinding night. His body was never recovered. By this time, the teenagers were sitting up straight in the pew, anxiously awaiting for the next words to come out of the old minister's mouth. The father, he continued, knew his son would step into eternity with Jesus, and he could not bear the thought of his son's friend stepping into an eternity without Jesus. Therefore, he sacrificed his son to save the son's friend. How great is the love of God that he should do the same for us. Our Heavenly Father sacrificed his only begotten Son that we could be saved. I urge you to accept his offer to rescue you and take a hold of the line he is throwing out to you. With that, the old man turned and sat back down in his chair as silence filled the room. The pastor again walked slowly to the pulpit and delivered a brief sermon with an invitation at the end. However, no one responded to the appeal. Within minutes after the service ended, the two teenagers were at the old man's side. "That was a nice story," politely stated one of the boys, "but I don't think it was very realistic for a father to give up his only son's life in hopes that the other boy would become a Christian." "Well, you've got a point there," the old man replied, glancing down at his worn Bible. A big smile broadened his narrow face. He once again looked up at the boys and said, It sure isn't very realistic, is it? But I'm standing here to tell you that the story gives me a glimpse of what it must have been like for God to give up his son for me. You see,
I was that father, and your pastor is my son's friend. Sometimes sacrifice is a difficult thing to do. But we are called to do whatever we feel God is calling us to do at the given moment. This man believed that his son would be called home. And this other boy whose life he saved ended up giving his life to God in God's service. So with that said, I want us all to ponder what we might do in our life that will make a difference in someone else's, that could bring someone else closer to God. I love you all dearly. Remember, this pastor loves you and always will. God bless you all and have a great rest of your day.